All right, hello everyone. Welcome to our next chapter and our next lesson here. We're going to be talking about the process of lawmaking. So, objectives and standards. You will be able to explain the role of the legislative branch of government, describe the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution, recognize how judges interpret laws, explain how agencies are involved in the lawmaking process, understand how regulations enforce laws, recognize the different types of court systems, and describe how treaties and laws function at an international level. I know that's a lot of objectives there, but don't worry, if it seems like a lot, I'm going to try to simplify it for you. Okay, so go ahead and take a moment there to look over the standards as well, please. All right, our desired result. How are laws created? So, how are laws created is our desired result question there. So, power of legislatures. Hopefully you might recognize that building there. That's the U.S. Capitol building where our national legislature is located. The federal government and state governments have legislatures, which are the primary lawmaking bodies. Okay, so in our government, in our national legislature, we have Congress. And Congress is made up of two houses, okay? We have the House of Representatives, which has 435 members, which are based on the state's population. What that means is the more people you have in your state, the more people you have in your House of Representatives. For example, California has more representatives than, say, like Delaware, okay? Because Delaware is a smaller state, has less population. California, bigger state, has more people, so they get more representatives in Congress. That's why a lot of times when the census comes out, which is coming out again in 2020, when we measure to see how much population has grown or shrunk in different areas or different states, that's why states want to have more population so they can have more votes in the House of Representatives. We also have the Senate. So the Senate is equal. There are 100 members, and there's 2 from each state. So no matter how big or small a state is, there's 2 from each state. Pennsylvania gets 2 senators. Hawaii gets 2 senators, California gets 2 senators, Texas gets 2 senators, whatever. Everybody gets 2 senators in the Senate, okay? Now, statutes are laws. Statutes are laws passed by Congress that affect every person in the United States. Now, we also have state legislatures, so that's the national legislature, but we also have a Pennsylvania state legislature, and in the Pennsylvania state legislature, we also have a Pennsylvania House of Representatives and a Pennsylvania Senate, and that kind of works a little bit the same way that they pass laws as well, but those laws are strictly for statewide issues, okay? So limits on legislatures. While Congress has the power to establish federal laws, it is also limited in certain things it can do. States typically have broader power to legislate over areas not granted to the federal government, okay? However, states are also limited in their power to legislate as well. We also have cities and towns and counties. They can also pass laws known as ordinances. Maybe some of you have these in your towns or in your counties or in your cities. You know, it might be an ordinance that, you know, you can't make noise after 10 o'clock p.m. on a weeknight, right? Or you can't cut your grass, like I know in my city, in my town, on the weekends, people aren't allowed to cut their grass, or landscapers aren't allowed to cut their grass on on the weekend at people's houses, like before like 8 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning. I forget which, but that's an ordinance. It's a law that's strictly for your city, your town, your county, whatever the case may be. So the Supremacy Clause. Federal laws can sometimes come into conflict with state or local laws. Now, courts ruled the state laws invalid to federal laws because of the Supremacy Clause in the United States Constitution. Okay, so what I have here is this looks like the U.S. Constitution here. It says "We the people," which is how the U.S. Constitution starts. And then these are some of our states here. We have like California, Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Idaho looks like back there, Oklahoma. So the Constitution is kind of looking at the states and telling them, hey, you better follow the Supremacy Clause. You need to pay attention to these things, okay? You can pass your own laws, but if those laws come into conflict with federal law, then federal law takes supremacy, okay? It takes precedent, okay? The U.S. Supreme Court has also ruled that the federal government has also overstepped its power in some laws that are limited to the states, okay? So it can go both ways. The courts can rule that the states have to follow the federal government, and they can also rule that this federal government has to, not pass so many powerful laws on the states, all right? Now, elected officials try to respond to the needs of Americans by introducing legislation known as a bill. So before a law becomes a law, it's known as a bill. If a bill is passed by the legislation, and not vetoed or denied or stopped by the executive, it could be a governor, it could be a president, whoever, it then becomes a law. Okay? Now, interpreting laws. People must obey a law when it is passed, right? You have to follow the speed limit, you have to, stop at red lights or stop signs, things like that. However, sometimes the language of a law is difficult to understand, so disputes can end up in court over misunderstandings of a law. Legislative intent is when a judge determines what a law means. Legislative intent is when a judge determines what a law means, okay? Many times, laws are drafted or brought about multiple times, but the language, is still unclear. So a judge must consider certain things when interpreting a law. Is the law too vague? Is it not specific enough? Specific enough in what it's asking? Does it say, hey, you have to follow the speed limit? Well, if the law doesn't state what the speed limit is, then people might not know that. Am I supposed to go 25 miles an hour? Am I supposed to go 65 miles an hour? So the law has to state that, hey, on neighborhood roads or in school zones, the speed limit is, 10 miles an hour in school zones or 5 miles an hour in school zones, whatever the case may be. And then maybe on the highways, it's, 75 miles per hour. So it has to be very specific in what it's asking. You can't just say, oh, you have to follow the speed limit. If you don't know what the speed limit is, that's not fair. Okay? Are the words used in the law understandable? Are they using big fancy words that no one understands, that even, the judge might not understand? Are the words simple enough that everybody understands what the law is saying? You cannot go more than 25 miles an hour in a residential neighborhood. That's pretty understandable, right? Everyone understands those words. Everyone, knows what the speed limit is. So that would be a fair law, okay, for everyone to understand and follow. Now, the work of agencies. In many cases, the laws that affect us are made by government agencies. So while legislatures address problems in a general way, they might say, hey, we want to stop people from speeding outside of schools. Agencies are responsible for establishing the rules and regulations that make laws more specific. Like, okay, we want people to only go 25 miles an hour. We want kids to stop at the crosswalk. We want people, when they're driving a car, to stop at the crosswalk when kids are crossing. Okay, they're the ones who put the specifics in what we need to follow in terms of the law. Following the attacks on September 11th, 2001, the federal government established new agencies and reorganized, existing agencies to increase homeland security. For example, the Transportation Safety Administration, the TSA, usually checked, passports and luggage and things like that. They ensured safety, so they screen luggage and ensure the safety of an airplane flight. So state and local agencies. Our lives are greatly impacted by agencies at the state and local level. So while the TSA is a federal agency, we also have agencies at the state and local levels too. For example, zoning commissions. Zoning commissions decide what buildings can be developed in a certain location. Are we building a shopping mall? Are we going to build a school? Are we going to build a housing development? So zoning commissions are kind of local agencies that decide what can be built where. Agencies may decide if a restaurant can serve alcohol or can have live music. School boards can approve courses for schools and students. So these are all examples of agencies at the state and local levels that impact us. Agencies can also administer government programs and provide services, sometimes for the elderly or people who are disabled. The laws that are approved by agencies are not typically voted on, okay? So the laws that are approved by agencies are not typically voted on. However, agencies can hold public hearings before enacting regulations, such as saying to the public, hey, come on in and listen to what we're going to put in place. People and businesses may provide comments on possible regulations, and some people approve of agency regulations that you say like, while, not like, others do not. Now the courts. Many times courts can also create laws as well. If a person loses a trial, they may ask for a higher court to review and change the result of the trial, and these are known as appeals or appellate courts. They're known as appeals or appellate courts. And we're going to talk much more about them later on, okay? A decision made by an appeals court or appellate court sets a precedent. Okay, it sets a precedent. What that means that lower courts in the jurisdiction of the higher court must follow the decision of the appeals or appellate court. So, for example, there are United States Courts of Appeals, okay, and they're divided up into different districts. That's why you see the numbers here. So, like, here is District 9, here's District 10. For us, for Pennsylvania, you can see we're kind of in 3, right, along with New Jersey, Delaware, and I believe somewhat Maryland, not Maryland, but New Jersey, Delaware. That's where we're at, okay, and it's divided here, Western, Middle, and Eastern. If somebody loses a trial in Pennsylvania, they would go to the 3rd District, okay, court for the U.S., and they would say, hey, I don't think my trial was fair, I didn't get to do this happened during the trial, something happened, whatever the case may be, that you feel that something bad that or went wrong in the trial, okay? If the higher court rules in your favor, in that person's favor, and says, hey, yeah, no, that wasn't fair, that precedent that that court says will now be accepted in the other in District 3. It might not be accepted in District 11 down here in Florida and Alabama and Georgia, but all the courts, all the lower courts in District 3 now have to follow what that judge set forward. Okay? So laws at the international level. The laws that define the conduct of countries are known as international laws. Many times they're created through treaties, okay? A treaty is an agreement or contract between countries. Now, treaties can be created by countries or by organizations such as the European Union, that's that flag here, or the United Nations. International laws can do different things, such as regulate commerce between countries, address refugees crossing international borders, regulate ownership of property, such as copyrights and patents. It can discuss the environment, and it can deal with discussions with regards to extradition. Extradition is the returning of a person suspected of a crime to the country. So, if an Italian person comes to the United States and commits a crime, or if they committed a crime in Italy and they come to the United States, Italy says, hey, we want that guy or that woman back, because they committed a crime here. The United States would send that person back probably. Now, sometimes countries don't. Sometimes countries don't have to, and they don't have extradition policies with the United States or other areas. But if an Italian person, like I said, commits a crime in that country, flees or runs away to the United States or England, and Italy calls on the phone and says, bring, we want that person back, typically we'll send that person back to serve punishment, okay? All right, our closure. How are laws created? Think about the role of legislatures, how about agencies, and even the courts and international laws. How are they created as well? All right, so I know it's a lot of information. Please try your best on the questions that follow, and I thank you all for listening. I hope you have a great rest of your day or night, and I hope to talk to you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.